Hello, Decluttering Club. Sarah Mueller here. I am here today with two very special guests. And we are going to be talking to you today about boundaries and decluttering, which is such an important topic. Boundaries and decluttering. When we can enforce our boundaries, then our lives, our decluttering, our getting organized is so much easier. So Elisa and Salin have lots of tips and lots of advice for you. But before we get into that, I want to introduce you to them. So Salin Lowe is a decluttering coach, and her website is the Decluttering Companion. And we will have all the links for you along with this video. So don't worry about that too much. But Salin, do you want to introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do with people when you declutter? Just give us a little background there.
I think the idea of calling it a companion is that it's judgment free. It's not what you should do or my talking down to you. It's working with you, because I've had to have some conversion experience myself in decluttering. Mm-hmm. And I'm of a certain age that I know that my physical limitations present themselves from time to time. So I'm aware of that with other people and want to help them in that way. I have a background in ministry, so I've been a lot of listening to people and helping them in that way. So I'm enjoying that part with decluttering too.
Love it. And you work with people one-on-one as a coach?
Oh, principally, yes. I may get into the small group, but one-on-one is the primary way.
One-on-one. Love it. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. And Elisa Rasmussen, did I say your name right? Did I get that right? Yes. Okay, good.
Fine. Yeah.
Great. So Elisa works, your business is ABC Decluttering because you are a librarian, as we see the beautiful card catalog behind you.
Card catalog.
Love the card catalog. It's so fun. So just tell us a little bit about your business.
Well, I am primarily one-on-one coaching, working with people that kind of make plans for decluttering and then help them through the questions and issues that arise as you follow through on your plan. And I'm especially good with books.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. We may need to set some boundaries with the books in our lives, huh?
Right. Although I'm in favor of books, so wouldn't tell anyone to get rid of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to have limits.
Yeah. Why don't we start there? Like, what kinds of boundaries have you found it useful to set, like maybe for yourselves or with your clients, in terms of like how they approach their homes and their things, their possessions? You want to go first, Elisa?
Sure. I'd say, well, I guess the very first thing is that boundary that says, how much is too much? So that when you look around and you feel overwhelmed by your things, you probably have too many things. And so you have to, you want your home to have everything you need and things that you love, but not more than you can handle. Mm-hmm. And so having that boundary that says too much stuff is not good for me. It doesn't make me happy, and it doesn't make my home feel like a sanctuary or a place I enjoy being. Then that's where you draw that line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And then how you deal with it is another question. But even just knowing too much stuff is not good for me. It doesn't matter if I love it all. It doesn't matter if Aunt Grace really wants to give me more. Maybe let's just start there. It's just not good. It's not serving me to allow that in my house. Mm-hmm. It's a tough one.
Right.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. How about you, Salin? What are some boundaries that you've been setting, either for yourself or with clients?
Well, all of a sudden, this sort of starts to sound like how you've tried to explain before, constraint. I mean, mm-hmm. that we are constrained, and we have to recognize the constraints in our lives. And some of it can be physical. Certainly, I was just talking about having just finished a trip that was exhausting. 20 years ago, I could have done it and bounced back and enjoyed in spite of the exhaustion. And now I'm at a point that, no, I need to say there's only so much I can do. And sometimes the plans have to be changed so that I do less. I have to understand the constraints. And some of the constraints are things, and some of the constraints are time, and some of the constraints are physical energy about doing that. And then how much I can deal with just doing it. Decluttering, so much of it has to do with the emotions attached to things, and how much can I deal with in a given day or time period. And so it's okay to have constraints. I mean, I know we act like we ought to be unlimited individuals, but we are finite, and so is our energy and our emotional energy. So
right. I mean, we think I could do this when I was 20. I went on a 20-day trip to Europe. Like, why is this different? And then we pay the price. Like,
not only did you do it in 20 days, you probably carried your own luggage at that time. And now it's like, I can't wait to find a cart or somebody to take care of things. So there's a lot of, even for the things you can still do, you do them differently. You have to understand some of that constraint and doing that, and not feel like you're a failure because you're not still 20 years old.
Yeah. Right. Like, it's not better or worse. It's just different.
Right.
The things that you did when you were 20 are not the same things that you did when you're 40 or 60 or 80. Like, clearly.
And they're not right. And they're not the same things that you enjoy, and they're not the same. And it doesn't make it better or worse. Right. And it's the same thing with decluttering, that you hang on to these things that remind you of the past. But if they're not things that you enjoy anymore, then you don't need all of it to remind you of the past, right? And so yeah, you have those limits that say, well, how many things do I need that remind me of this? Or how do I let go gently of the things that don't serve me anymore?
Yeah, and just asking that question, do I need 100? Do I need, I don't know, cards, for instance, right? A lot of people keep a lot of handwritten cards and letters. Do I need 1,000? Do I need 100? Maybe 2? Somewhere in between. Like, just even asking that question might really turn on a light bulb for some people. But
well, and everyone's answer is going to be different, and that's okay. But some people might want to hang on to, lots of cards because they love the handwritten notes in them and whatever. And then other people might not. Like, I don't save any cards, but I still have every rock concert t-shirt that I got 35 years ago. And I can't give those up, right? They have a special meaning for me.
Well, and it's not, the decision you make today doesn't have to be forever.
Right.
And you can do maybe less is more. Maybe if you have all these cards, but pick the ones that are, if you pick the ones that are really special to hang on to, then you can see those better, because, the white space need in our brains that it's not just this whole stack of them. Read them once, go through them and read them as much as you can, or decide if it's been sitting there for a period of time. I had a shoebox of letters that I received my freshman year in college, and I'd hung on to them over 50 years. And I looked at them and I realized I didn't have the energy to go through them. So why was I hanging on to them? But it wasn't the first thing I eliminated. I could do that later.
No. And that's
later.
another,
I think of it as kind of archaeology of our lives, that we go through the layers.
Oh yeah,
as we're able to.
It's true. And that's another thing about boundaries and energy, and what it's like, and we say this all the time, right? Start with what's easy. Do what's easy. Do what is not beyond your capacity first, before you build it up like a muscle and are able to get through those harder decisions.
Yeah.
I think,
when I think boundaries, I automatically think of other people, but it sounds like we really started, both of you have started with like our own boundaries for ourselves, like our body's boundaries to doing this work. So Salin, do you have thoughts on, like, how did you, how did you make that shift? You use the example of the trip, right? You went on a trip and you realized, okay, my body is telling me we need to stop, we need to take a break here. Can you talk a little bit about how do you do that without, feeling judgment for yourself, I guess?
Well, I mean, I've learned that there are things that aren't worth it. When I was 20 and took a trip, well, actually about 22, I went to Europe by myself. And I did. I lugged the bags around and it was fine because saving the money was the important kind of value I had then. Now I had 2 bags and I wasn't sure that that both of them would travel without paying an extra fee, but the fee is worth it because I don't want to lug those bags, even one of them, through the airport, even though there should be room in the cabin and I could do that. But I've learned, for me, being freed of that is worth whatever they charge me for it practically. Certainly what I thought it was going to be $50. And so learning that there's a different trade-off now at this time in my life, and that after 50 years more on, that I'm entitled to some luxury. That just
Yes.
saving money is not worth it, but it's worth it to me to have the luxury of having someone else take care of my bags.
Oh,
Yes,
that
that
is a
is-
good thought. Yes, right?
Exactly. And that's the sort of the last time I went to Europe, which was before COVID,
Mhm.
I'm kind of hitting that point, right? I'm still dragging my own bags around,
Mhm.
but I got to the point where I said, oh, I am too old to stay in a youth hostel. I want a private room and my own bathroom and with a real bed. And I'm
Mhm.
not going there anymore. And it's worth the money to me. And it's partly about my comfort and, what's going to kill my back if I try to sleep on somebody's couch kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's just a different way of looking at it. It's saying I'm in a different place in my life and I can afford these amenities now.
Mhm.
Right. And it's similar to if you're clearing stuff out of your house and you say, I can't pick up those boxes anymore, or I can't drag this couch out by myself or whatever. It's okay to say, hey, but you know what? I am worth getting a couple of teenagers to carry this out for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm entitled to some luxury. I think we should all tattoo that across our foreheads. I love that. Right? Because it's so true, right? Like, oh, I can do this. I should be able to move the boxes. I should be able to push myself. But why? Why are we doing that? Like,
Well, and our coaching and offer of our coaching is obviously, in a sense, that's a luxury for those people who afford themselves this. But you're entitled to someone who helps you do it emotionally and with guidance, as well as the physical people to do it. I mean, it's
100%,
right. And it can be
right?
worth it. I helped a friend with her mother's apartment after her mother passed away. We had to clear out her apartment, and I went down and helped her literally sort things out and divide it up, and then she could make the decisions once I had it categorized. And she said, it's money, it's a lot of money to spend, but I could never have gotten through this much stuff in this amount of time
Mhm.
without help.
Right.
And sometimes,
Not a luxury.
saying
Sometimes.
I need help
Mhm.
because I can work better and I can work faster if I have assistance
Mhm.
than if I'm trying to do it by myself and I keep getting distracted, or I'm dealing with grief and I'm crying when I find things.
Mhm.
right.
And that's,
That absolutely. All right. What about boundaries with other people? Okay. How do you all handle this? Let's say somebody calls you up and says, I've been thinking of you. I'm ready to give you whatever, my extra china, and she's so happy and she loves you so much. And your thought is, oh dear, this is a terrible
But
idea.
I think you kind of have, in a kindly way, acknowledge what your limitations are. I mean, oh dear, I've just been trying to downsize the amount of stuff I have. I just can't try to make that decision anymore. Surely that you haven't, if it's a dear aunt or somebody like that, surely there's someone else in the family who might appreciate it more. And if not, surely there's somebody maybe who frequents a thrift shop or someplace like that would be very happy to get this. And for me, it would just sit in the corner and get dust anyway. So I don't think that does your precious belonging any good. But you got to be kindly about it. But the reality is, if somebody else does, you're not using it to its fullest anyway. So you got to be able to excuse yourself from taking on the world's problems. That's some of the boundaries too, as well as their possessions, their problems and their possessions. Sometimes those are the same things, sometimes not.
Like, it's okay to say no to those things.
Right.
Might be hard, but it's actually okay to say no, thank you. I don't want that thing that you really want to give me.
Right.
About,
and it is hard that I've spent so much of my life being poor, right? So that whenever people had things to give away, I would take them because I felt like I didn't have enough and I didn't have enough money and I needed things or their things were better than my things and I'd take them and trade out. And so I've long had this habit of saying yes to everything that came in and then having to sort through it and get rid of it again. And it turned out to not fit my needs. But again, you get to a point in your life where you're like, I can't take it in just to get rid of it for you. Right. And that's when
you're not a transfer station.
Right.
No.
Right. And so, I mean, it depends on your situation and if it's your 90-year-old mother who wants to get rid of something and can't understand. And sometimes you just have to say, yeah, put it in my car, Mom. And then just take it to the thrift store and she never has to know where it went.
Sure.
But other times you can just say, thank you so much for thinking of me, but I just don't have a use for it right now, or I don't have room for it and I can't take it in.
Yeah.
I am one of 4 siblings and the oldest. But when my mother died, one of the kindest things that we did for each other is decide that if you take something, like part of Mother's furniture or work of art or anything, that's fine. And once you take it, it's yours, which means nobody else can tell you how you ought to treat it. Nobody else can tell you if it's time to give it away or take it to the dump or whatever you're going to do with it, because the rest of us agree that once you have it, it's your place to decide, not just your responsibility, but your place to decide. And that's really freeing. I've started, there's some things that just don't make sense anymore. My sister is telling me that the bedroom set we grew up on needs to go to the dump, and that's fine. She didn't even have to tell me but
right. You don't need to check with the rest of the family to make sure it's okay to let go of it. Right.
Yeah.
And it's good if you can set up some boundaries like that. If they're family members getting various pieces of furniture or various items that are precious in some way or other, have emotional attachment. It's yours now. You get to decide. I won't tell you.
That's good.
What you ought to do with it once it's yours.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good, just to have that discussion in advance so that you're like, I don't want this anymore. I don't need to pass it on or even check. I can just let it go. And that's fine.
And it works. It kind of works both ways, right? So it's saying you don't have to ask us if you're going to get rid of something, but at the same time, if some sibling wants to get rid of something, that's their responsibility, and they shouldn't throw it back at you when they're done with it, right? You can say, okay, no, we're done with that.
Right, right. I
Don't
don't
give
Right.
it to me and make
that.
it my problem.
Right.
Right.
Oh, that's so good. Right. Because I think sometimes we think if people make a request, then now it is our problem, because they want us to accept it, but we don't have to pick up their problem. It's
We do have a luxury in our family that one lives in Chicago, one in St. Louis, one in Texas, and me in Connecticut. So it's not easy to just take it over to somebody else's
Right.
house.
Mhm.
So that makes it
that
easier.
helps. That helps. Yeah. Yeah. And what about the whole guilt factor? What's your thoughts on, I feel bad saying no? What would you say to someone who came to you and said, I really want to say no, thank you, but I feel so bad? Maybe maybe they're not even getting a guilt trip. It's all self-imposed, because I think like our guilt is, it tends to be like internal.
Largely.
How do you help people through that?
Well, I want to find out what they're guilty about. I mean, is it if they had a difficult relationship with whoever is trying to give you something and again, I think what Elisa said, a lot of times you can take stuff, and just the fact that I use the word stuff, take things, and the person probably is never going to ask. You may hold on to it for a couple of months, but the person's probably never going to ask. And you can, if it doesn't hurt them, if they don't know, then it not necessarily feel guilty, but it has to do with what the emotional import of our belongings starts to assume in our lives. And if there's a way to kind of, I'm trying to figure out, take the emotion out of something.
Right, right. Like
make it just stop, just be stopped.
Right.
It's just stuff. We forget that so easily.
Well, it's what Sarah says all the time. What are you making it mean? Because things don't have meaning in themselves. And so if you're feeling guilty about these things, what story are you telling that causes you to feel that way? Because it's not the things making you feel that way.
Right, right. The piece of paper, or the painting, or the clothing, it's just clothing, it's just paper, but what is the story? And you could just stop telling that story. You could totally do that. Isn't that crazy? You get to decide. When we can't take any of it with us, right? It's all of it is gonna, one day it's either gonna get recycled, and we kind of feel good about that. But even that, like, eventually it's all gonna go.
Well, and one of the things, though, I find in a sort of reverse boundary kind of thing, a lot of the purpose for some of the people who are doing significant decluttering is they don't want to leave a burden for somebody else to go through it. I don't have children, I have nieces. And the last thing I want is to think that because I wouldn't go through stuff, it's just the most terrible experience of their lives trying to go through my things later. So my boundary is like, would they care about this? If they don't care about this, and haven't looked at it in 30 years, it's probably time for it to go someplace else. And yes, it meant something to me at one time, but I don't want to burden somebody. That's a boundary I have. I don't want things that I could have gone through and made it easier for somebody else to get that done. So sometimes the boundary is a good one to protect somebody else.
That's really good. A reverse boundary. I really like that idea. Like, I don't want to dump my stuff, by accidentally or on purpose on someone else. So I'm going to take care of it right now, where I have the option. You have the control right now. That's very thoughtful.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because we could be on the receiving end of clutter, right? When someone else is trying to give us their things, or we could be on the giving end. If we don't do something, right? That's the default. Right? If you never declutter, then someone is going to have to clean it up. And do you like that thought, that idea?
Right.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Go ahead. Did you have something to add? You look like you have a thought going on, Elisa.
Yeah, I had it and it's trying to get away from me.
I know.
But it was something about leaving things that that don't necessarily mean anything to other people, right? They're important to you, or they have memories, or they're things that you remember from your childhood, or that was in your parents' house or whatever. And that when, you know, when you're gone, when the next generation comes to go through it, it doesn't mean anything to them because they have no memory of it. And so if it's something that's usable, it makes more sense to pass it on now so that someone can get some use out of it than to hold on to it until it's not usable anymore. And then somebody's just going to throw it away. And I've seen that even like with practical things, that I have a tendency to, you know, hoard office supplies or whatever. And it's like, oh, maybe I don't need 12 boxes of staples because I can't use that many staples in my lifetime, right? I'm not going to use 100 staples a day for the rest of my life. So maybe I can get rid of those now before they get old and rusted together and they're just going to have to go in the trash. You know, if I just donate them to the thrift store, somebody can buy a box of staples really cheap and get some use out of them, or whatever that thing is.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the time to get rid of things, when they're useful.
That's I mean, you mentioned like time is also a boundary, right? Things have a limited lifespan. And there's no point hanging on to something and not using it until its lifespan is up.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's so important to know what your boundaries are, right? Whether it's your body, it's your time, it's your emotional energy, or it's just your space. Like, where do you want those to be on purpose? Not just, you know, I'm going to fill it up until I can't walk through the room. I mean, that's one way to set a boundary, but it might not be the best one, right? So like just taking the time to think that through and then act to stay within those boundaries, right? Oh, and so was it Elisa, you said boundaries are, or one of you said boundaries are self-care.
Right.
Elisa.
That if you think of a boundary as self-care, because it is there to protect you. So it will protect your space. If you say, no, I'm not going to bring anything in that I don't want, I'm protecting my home and my space. If you're respecting your physical limitations, that's a boundary that protects your health, because overdoing it and trying to push yourself too far is just going to make you ill or make you feel bad, and you'll get less done in the long run because you'll have to spend more time recovering. That's a tough one. Could be a tough one to set. Right. And it can even protect your relationships. If you're willing to be like honest but kind, it keeps you from resenting everyone who's piling their stuff on you.
Right. Well, and you have to have your own boundaries of being self-confident enough to say you're making the decisions that need to be made. I mean, not people who, if you have a family member who doesn't want to get rid of things yet or is upset that you are, but you have to have your own kind of personal sense about what you're able to deal with and not try to be what somebody else is. So you have your own, that's self-care in that way too. I have to do this for me so that I can get up in the morning and not feel guilty about that scary room or that mountain of stuff that's in the basement or whatever, and that I have to do it. I mean, but there's also the stay in your own lane for other people, especially who are living in the same space, about not resenting that they may not be at the same place you are about going through things. You have to do what you can do and the areas that are yours. But if your spouse has a collection of matchbook cars that he's been collecting for 60 years, you just kind of have to work around it. and not expect he's going to get rid of it, but at the same time, you are. Maybe he'll see. I mean, we see some people like in the OMH membership that say that they were just shocked at that, how their spouses have now do kitchen zero when they're gone, or are beginning to understand and beginning to see the value. Maybe somebody will, but if they don't, it has to be okay too.
Right. Because they're not all going to be on board the same way we are. That's okay.
Right. But I think Salin was saying before we started the call, because you mentioned people who live with you, but if they are people who do not live with you, you don't necessarily need to store their things, right? And that is a boundary that says, this scary room is my grown daughter's bedroom full of stuff that she says she wants, but doesn't want enough to take home.
Right.
And so that's when you set a boundary that says, okay, you have this much time. And depending on how far away they live, you might give them more time before they can come and look through it. But then you can say, but I need this space. I need this space, or I just need to not have it mentally weighing on me in my home.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, if it's one thing if you're in college and you don't know where you're going to wind up. But if you're 35 and married, if your kid's 35 years old and married, and it's like, okay, if you want it, come and get it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a reasonable amount of time to deal with that. And then whatever you don't want is going to go. And
then actually doing that, right?
Doing, right.
Because I think most of the time, the things that get left behind, you know, they may hear you say, you know, here's the deadline, and they take action. That's when you know they actually care. But if they don't take action, then they probably don't care. Either that or they don't believe you. Right? They think, oh, mom's just going to bail. Like, she's not really going to get rid of those boxes. So you just want to be really clear. I will be, you know, whatever you're going to do with them.
Tell them what day the dumpster is coming.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, it's helpful if there's a physical change that they know is about to happen. Sometimes it's that they're moving. And then, you know, that's my parents moved, and that's when I knew I had to get my second grade workbooks. But I've arranged for a dumpster to come the first of next month. So it's your choice.
Right. Well, and the change might just be, I want this room for my own purposes.
Right.
This isn't just, you know, your room for the rest of your life, right? I want this to become my craft room, right? Yeah. This is going to be my sewing room, and I need your stuff out of it, or whatever, or a guest room that I can actually put guests in because it's not full of your childhood teddy bears.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Right?
Yeah. And it's totally fine if they're unhappy, right? Like, we can let people be unhappy.
Right. Well, because that's just their story, right? It's not. Yeah. It doesn't mean you don't care.
Right.
It just means it's not your stuff.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, that's so good. That's so important.
And sometimes it doesn't have to be that there's not enough space. I mean, one of the kind of things that makes it easy for me to keep having, has made it easy, is I have about 2,400 square feet above ground and 1,500 square feet in a basement. And I live alone. And man, that's a multitude of sins that can accumulate in places like that.
Yeah. So it isn't for you
about space. Yeah. And but it, on the other hand, it's just tiring just to walk through it. When
it doesn't have to be full. It's just about what you want and how you want your home to be. Right. What are you comfortable with? Right. What makes you happy?
I think everyone has their own definition of what is too much. And some people don't get there until every space is literally full. And some people are like, I don't want anything on the counter. It's too full if I can't put everything away. And so it's really important for you to know where do you fall, right? And not one is not better than the other. It's just whatever your preference is. It's all preference.
Mhm.
by working with a coaching client, working them to define what having a room functional and useful and pleasing is to them.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
not my standard. It's what makes them comfortable.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
might suggest that there's some things that could make them a little more comfortable if there was a little less chaos in the room. And maybe a bedroom that where you could actually sleep on the bed would be a plus. But a lot of the degrees are really different for different people, and it's their lives. They just have to work with what is the best way for their life and for their space.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful thought. On that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much to both of you for being here today. I know that the people that work with you are they're so transformed, and it is such a special thing to have a one-on-one coach. So I just appreciate both of you. If any of you watching this are looking for a one-on-one coach to help you go through some things, whether it's the books, it's the memories, it's the dishes, whatever it is, reach out to Salin and Elisa. We have their links with this video. You can also find them on our network coaching page. And I know they would love to talk to you. So thank you for being here. It was really good discussion, everyone.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Good to be
Awesome.
with you, Elisa, and
Bye.
always with you, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.